Welcome. My name is Ivan Elias. I am a master's student and international student at Boise State University, and this is my podcast, Venturing Voices. Here, we will talk about and advocate for the challenges faced by international students and how these challenges impact their lives, engagement in class, inclusion in the community, and relations with peer and professors. By hosting international students in this podcast series and hearing their authentic stories, I am aiming to promote cultural competency in our Boise State community. So let's introduce our first international student guest, Jay from Singapore. Jay, you are pursuing a master's degree in business administration. Could you tell us a little bit about you, and could you tell us a little bit about the culture in which you grew up in Singapore?
Yes, hi. So my name is Jay, and as you said, I'm pursuing my MBA here at Boise State. A little bit about me. I grew up in Singapore most of my life, and for my undergrad, I did an exchange in the U.S., and that's the first time when I realized, I really want to come back. And so when I went back to Singapore, I started my job, and there was an opportunity to come to Idaho for 2 years through my job, and I took that immediately. So for 2 years, I was down at Mountain Home, and that was during 2021 to 2022. And in 2023, I moved back to Singapore, and then decided, okay, it's time to quit my job, and I moved back to Idaho to pursue my MBA here at Boise State. A little bit about the culture, I guess. Pretty much the phrase Asian culture kind of sums it up. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of want to be the best and do the best, both academically and in your work. And Singapore is a very densely populated state, so there's a lot of people around, and it's very different from Boise, how there's a lot of the pace of life, I guess is what I'm getting at. It's significantly faster in Singapore compared to Boise.
Cool. What made you want to come back to the States?
So I fell in love with the States in general the first time I came back in 2017. And when I was posted to Idaho for 2 years, I just fell in love with Idaho even more. And that's when I decided to come back to Idaho to pursue my master's.
Nice. Thank you. Our second international student guest today is from Ghana. He is pursuing a master's degree in public policy and administration. Let's welcome Lawland. Lawland, could you share a little bit about your journey so far?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Lawland Kubi. I'm from Ghana and currently international student in Boise State. Yeah, I have a long academic journey. It's like my whole life I don't really have much time to do formal work, professional work. Everything is about academics. I started with my bachelor's degree in political science. Then right from the bachelor's degree, I move on to national service. Right from national service, I move on to my master's degree in public administration. And whilst pursuing the master's degree, I think during my thesis phase, I came across some good articles, and then I was fortunate enough to research the authors, and most of them are Boise State professors. So that was when I started wow, I have to take this education further. I have to bump up, and then I find myself in the PhD. I applied to the PhD degree, and fortunate for me, I got picked. I have funding, and then that's what brought me to the United States. I'm fifth here in the program so far.
Nice.
Yeah, and when you talk about my country, Ghana, in terms of culture-wise, Ghana is is colonized by Britain, so it's like everything we do is, in terms of even our education format, everything we try to emulate that of the United Kingdom. And then in culture-wise, it's like a small country, but we have about almost 37 plus different ethnic groups which speak different languages. But the dominant language in Ghana, that when you go to any part of Ghana, is more like it's becoming a universal language. Apart from the English language, is what we call Twi, which is a local dialect, and then that is one of the things. And if you come to Ghana, it's because Ghana is an African country, we are black. It's like our key underlying feature in terms of culture is family. We don't joke with family. We tread on family values. We move together, we fall together. I think that's one of the takeaways that anywhere I go in the world, I will talk about Ghana.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing a bit about your country. And finally, I'm excited to introduce Casey Kennington. Casey is an assistant professor in the Boise State University Computer Science Department. Welcome. And because the computer science program counts a lot of international students, about 50%, I believe, you have a bit of experience working with international students, and you also lived abroad in France and Germany. Could you share with us a bit of your journey, and what is one of the main challenge you experienced while living abroad?
Sure. I spent ample time in Japan and France and Germany. Most of my graduate education was in France and mostly in Germany. I was 1 year in France and 6 years in Germany. I grew up in the United States, and I never really left the Northwest. It was culture shock, obviously, to go abroad because not very many people could speak English in some of the countries I went to. But learning the foreign languages was something that opened my mind up in a lot of very important ways. So that was key for me, very formative for me to spend time learning the languages of the countries I was in. And that was so powerful for me that it changed my career trajectory. I decided that I wanted to do more with languages somehow. So when I was working on my bachelor's degree, I knew computer science was going to be a good thing for career, but I wanted to bring computer science and language together. So I found the area of natural language processing, and that's what led me to Germany, then France through the Erasmus Mundus program in Europe. They have a lot of different master's programs. Germany wasn't too far removed from the United States, but obviously it's different. The cities were different. The food was different. The weather was different. I grew up in a kind of a desert area, and over there it rains a lot, and I was like, I really like this. And then I spent time in France, and I absolutely loved France, where I lived. I was only there for a year. I could have spent a lot more time there. Everything about it was great. The academics was great. And then I went back to Germany for my PhD, where I spent an additional 5 years. And along the way, I was growing my family. So it was a dream come true for me to see my children speak, learn a foreign language. I didn't even really care which language it was, as long as they could learn a foreign language. So
How many languages do your children speak?
Oh, just my older ones speak English and German. They were too young to really pick up French, and we weren't there long enough, unfortunately. But I do have a daughter who was born in France. So that was really great. I ultimately decided to come back to the United States after nearly a decade abroad at different intervals. Because there was an opening at Boise State. It was kind of coming back home. I have family around here, and I needed a place to kind of settle. And so I've been here since 2016 in the computer science department.
Awesome. Thank you. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about academics, learning styles, housing, and visa limitation. These topics are quite intense compared to my other topics in other episodes, and so I'm looking forward to hearing your insight and experiences about all these. So let's jump right into it. So Jay, you're from Singapore. How do teaching styles at Boise State differ from those in your country?
So the teaching pedagogy is very different from, on a basic level, it's very different. Although I can't really speak to whether it's a Boise State thing or a master's program thing. But I realized that, one, the pace is a lot faster, but also the emphasis, I feel, is on a very different thing. The emphasis I felt back home when I was doing my undergrad was a lot more the learning of what is going on in the class, versus while I'm doing my master's here, I've realized the emphasis feels more on the assignments that you turn in and the grading that you get of the class. I recall in the first few weeks of my master's journey here, a lot of the questions that students were asking the professors was, is this going to be on the test? Is this going to be on the exam? Which were questions initially I thought, that doesn't matter. Let's learn what we can, and then whatever's on the exam is on the exam. But that's the biggest difference, I feel, that the teaching kind of differs.
Do you think the students' mindset is different from like American students, or their mindset is different from students in Singapore?
I guess when it comes to higher institution learning, when it comes to universities and master's programs,
I feel that maybe that might be the case, but if you are in a university and you're in a master's program, even if you're in an undergraduate program, everyone would be there wanting to learn. You wouldn't join a university if you're not interested in academia. So I can't say for individuals per se, but in thinking of the concept as a whole of being a university student, I would think that everyone, regardless of where you are, is in it to learn something new. So, yeah. Anybody wants to add to that or kind of like relate to that or reflect?
I think like coming to the United States and comparing the education system compared to what I'm used to and what I grew up with, that is in Ghana, it's like there's a way different. I feel like in Ghana, education is like, we treat education as, even among we the students, we see ourselves as competitive, like competition. We are competing for the sports up there, the up stop sports, not more about trying to understand what is being communicated and try to apply it, but more like let me get a higher certificate, like graduate with upper or graduating with first class, and then at the end is going to open more doors for me. And one thing I realized that is also way different in terms of academia in the United States and then that of Ghana is student faculty relationship in classroom relationship, the classroom environment. It's like when you come to United States, I feel like you feel more at ease to be able to approach your professor when something is, you find you are facing some challenges, certain things is not going well, and then you it's like there's an open door that you can enter anytime that you feel like this is a challenge. Let me talk to this professor and try to iron out what would be the possible ways that I can be able, compared to what I am used to back in Ghana, where it is even difficult for you to even approach your professor. It is very even difficult to approach your professor, where you find you are facing challenges as a student, because, and moreover, one thing I also realized is that maybe I try to attribute it to maybe professor-student ratio, the number of students in each class compared to, because here at most all my classes that I've been to now, the highest number that we had is more like, we are not even up to 20, but that's compared to Ghana. Sometimes you have like 400 students in one class. And because of that, I don't know, the teacher-student ratio is very huge, and then students are not able to approach professors and then discuss issues that is in one way or the other affecting them in their performance academically. And I feel like that is one of the most takeaways that I can talk to about the education system or the academia in the United States, specifically in Boise State.
That's interesting. Can I ask a few questions?
Of course.
Coming from the professor's perspective here, before you came to the United States, did people warn you about like, you go to the United States and, or the professors don't listen to you? They only care about research. They won't have their door open. You have to get the grade. Is that what they warned you about, or did you have a different expectation coming in, and were you surprised to see that the classes were a little bit smaller and the professors were more accessible? Was that a surprise, or was that?
Yeah, it's like when you are out there, out of the United States, out of the territory, you feel like, well, what you hear is that academia is competitive, it is very challenging, and for you to be able to excel, you have to be extraordinary student. Mm-hmm. It's like that's the perception out there. But coming in, I feel like, wow, it's like the perception out there and what is really the reality on the ground, there's a huge variation. Because even I feel like right after getting admission, how the communication between me and professors, the feedbacks that I'm receiving right after getting admission, I was like, wow, that is even so, because it kind of gave me this kind of courage and hope that, well, there's something good out there, and then we have to explore. And one something that if we get to know more about and we to transfer those kind of principles and virtues into other systems, like where I grew up and where I received my education, I think like it's something that's going to change the terrain. I was talking to one of my professors the other time. I was telling them you come to United States and you are in a classroom and you feel like, no, I don't get something. This thing that is good is like I don't understand what is going on. And tomorrow you are in professor's office and professor can spend more like 30 minutes, 1 hour discussing issues and teaching you how to be able to navigate those things. Where in my part of the world, like back in Africa, you don't have that leniency or that privileges, because one is because maybe students are more than this. The number of students in class is more than that of what the professor is capable to at least deal with. I think that is how I can see it.
That's interesting. I know we have a lot of students in our programs from Southeast Asia and from, I don't know exactly which African countries, but there are quite a few people from Africa. And of course, a number from the United States, and then sundry other countries. A lot of them, especially from Southeast Asia, will come in and they'll come in. They feel, I know that before they kind of get used to how things operate here, there is a little bit of apprehension. They won't come into my office during office hours. They'll stand outside the door and wait for me to invite them, come in. And then they come in and they'll stand there and wait for me to say, have a seat. It's okay. And then they start calling me sir, 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 over and over again. And I have to tell them, it's fine. You don't have to call me that. The door's open during my office hours. Come talk to me during class, ask questions. And it takes a little while. I think students are a little bit surprised that professors are a little bit more accessible. I can't speak for all universities, but I know in some of the places where I've been as a student, they're not as accessible. Very focused on research. And it's not that professors here aren't focused on research. You're both grad students and you understand how important the research side is. But Boise State values teaching, and I very much appreciate that's one reason why I came here. So part of that, I think, is a Boise State thing. At least it's a like a state university thing, not an Ivy League thing, where there's a lot more accessibility to the professors, and they'll spend an hour with you on just to make sure you're getting there. My next question is for Jay. It's about the grading system, and this might be for both of you. In the United States, at least here, we distribute the grading across the semester on assignments, quizzes, and of course exams and other things like class participation. When I was in Germany, it was all on the final exam. So you did assignments, you did quizzes, all of that was helpful. You got feedback, but it was kind of a pass or fail grade, and you had to pass a certain number of them to qualify for the exam. Then you took the exam, and the grade you got on the exam was the grade you got in the class. And that really made people, I don't know, it kind of made us think like, what's going to be on the exam a little bit more. And it sounds like, I don't know, is that your experience with grade distributions in Singapore and here? Was there a difference there? And do you think that might have something to do with the focus on grades here?
So comparing my undergrad back in Singapore versus the master's here, it's pretty much similar. So we have like assignments and participation grades and all that scattered throughout the semester. And then you also have your final exam. So that would not be able to play into that because it's a similar concept.
Okay.
But something I feel that might play into it is the difference between undergrad and master's, possibly. Because in undergrad, you come from high school where you're just learning subjects versus like English, math, science, versus coming in this whole new environment of a specialized course. Whereas right now in my MBA, about half the class has business background. So we kind of already know the concepts, and we're just topping up to that. So maybe that has something to do with it.
I know in some professions, like where you land in your class rankings really matters. So there's this competitive streak. I don't know if that's how it is with the MBA here. It's not so important in a lot of majors. And the recruiters and the companies don't really look at your GPA. They're just like, which classes did you take? Did you graduate? Good, I'll hire you. And they interview you, obviously, but the ranking doesn't matter. So it does matter if you want to keep going in grad school and things like that, because they definitely look at GPA. But that's interesting. I do know that I teach a class that's both has both graduates and undergraduates in it. And the undergraduates are a little bit more eager to know, like, is this going to be on the exam? So that's kind of your theory, right? It might be that the grad students are like, you know what, I'm still in academia. I want to pay a little bit more to complete my degrees and get a little bit more education. So I'm really going to change my paradigm about how I approach classes. Mm-hmm. So grade is important, but it's a byproduct of the learning, not the goal. Mm-hmm. So interesting.
Cool. That's some great discussion. I kind of want to bounce back on what you said, like international student coming in your office and standing at the door and kind of like being hesitant to like start off the discussion and all. Did you, Jay and Lawland, did you feel kind of that at first when first approaching a teacher, you kind of like had this distance, and how did that evolve with time?
Yeah, I feel like I experienced some when I came, because I'm new to the system. One, culture-wise, I'm very new and I don't know how to. So sometimes I even walk to my professors. The door is open, but before I enter professor's office, I have to knock. And then when I knock and enter, I have to stand, as you've earlier said. And then after standing, probably, Lawland, please sit. I was like, okay, thank you. Because that is what I'm used to. Mm. Yeah, that is what our system is. Our system is like, you have to respect like elders. So when you before you enter into a professor's room or office, you have to knock and you have to get a response, enter, before you enter. Or if you, by chance, it is indicated on the doorpost, knock and enter, then that one you knock and then what, you don't wait for any response from anybody, then you enter. You enter, you don't just sit down, you have to wait to be invited to sit down, because that's sitting down immediately means like something like disrespect, because that is, I think, looking at this and compare my country to United States, I feel like one of the aspects that bring the variation have to do with culture. Yeah, culture-wise, I think it has to do with culture, because when I came, I also experienced the same thing. I feel like, and even last week, last week and this week, I entered into two professors' office, and then I knocked before I enter, and I have to be invited to sit down. Yeah, so that is what normally happens to me too.
I don't go to office hours. That's not a thing. Professors live in a different world. I'm in a different world. We don't interact. I will like stop my professors after class and ask like certain questions, but other than that, it's like you figure it out by yourself. You ask your classmates. Yeah, office hours is not a thing. But
do you have some kind of a direct advisor that you go to for questions in your program, or is it all just classwork?
It's a lot of classwork, and my professors do have office hours, like in the schedule. They're like, oh yeah, office hours at this time, come whenever you want. But it's just not in our culture to go for it. Like if I had a question from my advisor, I'd email them.
Okay.
Or I'd schedule a meeting to go to their office. Then I would go. I'm not just going to walk in. I don't know. It's just there's this mental barrier. I feel like it's just, yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I do feel that too. I do not feel comfortable just going to the office without scheduling an appointment first.
Exactly.
Because I want to respect the time of the professor, and I also want to let him know what is the meeting going to be about and kind of like what I want to talk about, so everybody's prepared and it's time efficient, and I don't take too much of their time, because I know professors' times are kind of valuable, and I don't want to bother, you know?
Yeah.
So my response to that, I've been on both sides of this. Obviously, I was a student for 10 years in academia at a number of universities, and they all varied. And I very much appreciate that you value the professor's time, that you don't want to waste it, because they are busy. Very busy. It's not just teaching that we do, it's research, it's service activities, it's invited talks, those kinds of things. So I very much appreciate that you're cognizant of that it does take time. On the other hand, I mean, the reason why I exist is to help students go from where they are to get the skill set and the knowledge that they need to make it out in the world. And I mean, I remember being a student and thinking, these professors are so smart. However they got there, it's amazing. I really look up to them. But now I'm on that side of it. I'm like, I'm a human, just like you are. Yeah, I went through a few more years of school, and I have some degrees and some titles by my name, but I'm still a human. So I very much remember how it was to be a student and how difficult it was. And also in the middle of a class, you're like, I don't want to ask a question right now. I'm in front of a bunch of other smart kids and they know what they're doing and I clearly don't. So you go timidly into office hours and try to get help. But that time is for you. Like if these students who come in, they're like, is it okay? Can I meet with you? I'm like, yes, of course. It's the time that I set aside to not do anything else. I'm not checking emails. I'm not looking at notifications. I'm not even looking at my computer screen. You have my undivided attention. And sometimes no one comes to office hours. Sometimes there's a line out the door. It kind of depends. But that's what it's for. It's for the students.
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you for giving that perspective. And it's kind of nice to hear it too for international students. I want to go back to what you said about class discussions and how international students are less likely to raise their hand and be like, I have something to say, because there is so much apprehension. It's like, for me, English is not something I learned growing up much. So for me, it's like, are they going to understand me? Is my accent too thick? If I have an explanation to do, is it going to take too long? Are they going to lose patience, and stop listening to me? There is so much stress about just speaking in class. And yes, like you said, international students are more likely to go after class, reach out to the professor or office hour. And still, I think, at least in France, it's figure out yourself first. And if you really can't figure it out, then you email the professor.
Sure, and fair enough. That's where the learning happens. But in some of my classes, because I know deeply what it is to sit in a class and have that perspective, and because I know how it is to live in a foreign country and learn a foreign language is hard, very, very hard. And you're in an academic setting, then that means it's even harder because you have this kind of more abstract thought that you have to bring to the table. And you don't want to sound silly in front of your peers. And in a lot of these programs, more than half the class, if not all the class except for you, is there.
I just want to say that everybody noted here.
So in my natural language processing class, it's about language. And so I start off the class in the first lecture making fun of English. Weird things that English has, weird artifacts, weird, strange things that English isn't very good at expressing, that other languages are good at expressing. And I think that softens it up for a lot of students who might be apprehensive. They then are like, oh, we're okay with not speaking English perfectly in here. And just because you do speak English well doesn't mean you're smarter than everybody else. So that's that class, though. I have been in classrooms and have been in situations where well-meaning professors they say things in such a way that are very highly idiomatic. And I was gone out of the United States for 7 years, and I came back, and some of these idioms I had to look up. I'm a native English speaker. But one of my colleagues was saying these things, and I was like, I don't know what any of these things mean. I know the words individually, but not the composition, not the idiom. And I thought, if I don't know this, do our students know this, undergraduate and graduate? So I try to be very careful to. It's not dumbing down the language. It's just rephrasing stuff in such a way that's more accessible to more people. And there are resources on campus from, for example, Jayshree in linguistics, who can help help us make lectures that are more accessible to students where English isn't their first language.
Right. Yeah. It seems like in your classroom you're able to kind of touch every student and build that sense of a sense of psychological safety, kind of where everybody can bring in themselves and be willing to communicate
I
freely.
I hope so. I'd like to say that it is, and I have had students say that. In my natural language processing class this semester, more than half the students are international. They're from all over. And we just had a discussion this past week, and people who haven't spoken up in the semester so far finally were raising their hands and saying stuff. And sometimes I'll listen to them, and I will recognize that they're a little bit timid and they're a little bit unsure in their language abilities. So when they're done talking, I'll kind of restate it to them and say this. And it's not me trying to explain it my way. It's me saying, is this what, it's a confirmation of understanding. Like, this is what you meant, right? And they say yes. And then the rest of the class gets it and we can move on. And that makes it a more positive experience for everybody. Then they're willing to say stuff because then I'm not going to misconstrue it.
Right.
And that's really important for open discussion.
Right. Thanks. Have you experienced something like this in the classroom where you're raising your hand and you're like, oh, they did not get it? Or, I mean, I guess for you too, English is kind of like what you grew up speaking, so it's not really applicable. I guess my question would be, how has your learning style evolved during your time studying in Boise? You know, at first you don't talk much. You're like, has that evolved?
Yeah, I think, personally, it's like my learning is evolving day by day, because we're to add up to what Professor have already spoken about. Yeah, my first day in class, I was so intimidated. Like it's like I was sitting, I was very shivering. Wow, it's like, wow, Lawland, what's happening? It's like, then I was asked to introduce myself. Come on, I was like, wow, I can't even speak two correct sentences. I was like, wow. It's like, I feel like, no, because first, after hearing my colleagues, the Americans, speak, yeah, and then listening to them, now I become so confused. How do I start even introducing myself? So I became so intimidated, and I became so I just mentioned my name, and that is it. I mentioned my name, the country I'm from, and then that is it. But after some time, I think like some of the professors that I first took a class from have really helped, because being a PhD student, most of the times it's like our classroom activities kind of different. It's like you go and read, other person to go and read, come and discuss what you think about the literature and all those things, your perceptions and what you think, your critiques and perceptions. So I feel like already going through the masters in the same area give me some kind of leverage in the literature, one, and then also getting a professor who creates the room like a round table discussion. What do you think? What is happening in your life? How was your day been? How was the week was? And then what are the challenges you are facing? Now, before we even come to the academic aspect of the class, why we are even in the class, I feel like that kind of boost my confidence level, one, in speaking, because one, I was thinking about my accent, though I speak English, but I listened to my fellow colleagues speak, the American speak, and I was like, wow, this is different. Sometimes you say things and someone will ask you, what? Is it what? Because maybe it's the same thing. I will say water. American will say water. So when I'm saying water and then Americans say water, it's like what I mean different thing to the person. So I have to come down and explain that I'm talking about this. So you have to sometimes add sign language to your statements to be able to make sense to someone. So I feel like those are some of the dynamics in classroom. And then as I'm speaking today, I think I have improved with my speaking ability, or like oratory in classroom, discussions, contributing in class, and I feel like now my confidence level is high. And to conclude on that, I think as an international student, one of the contributing factor to that kind of timidity in classroom at our first time has to do with, I feel like, this kind of imposter syndrome. Because of the imposter syndrome, you feel like I don't belong here. And then that alone psychologically melts you down, make you feel like you are not, you don't befit to be in that classroom. So by being in that classroom, you have to impress. That's one. You have to impress, and that alone puts some kind of pressure on you in as a student. One, and then that pressure leads you to committing certain basic errors that under normal circumstances as a student or at that level, the masters or PhD student, you shouldn't find yourself doing. But I feel like today, taking first semester class, almost about to complete second semester classes, have really helped me, and I really give a thumbs up to my professors. Nice. They have been so welcome and so great. So
it's good to hear.
Awesome. Yeah. Jay, I remember you mentioning kind of like between the British English and the American English, some like struggle in classrooms. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so Singapore, same thing like Ghana, we used to be a British colony, and so we learn British English, which similar enough because communication-wise, it's, I guess, easier than what Lawland mentioned with my accent. It was pretty easy. But when it came to written work, like my spellings would be different. And initially it was fine, but I remember for a communications class, I had asked my professor because for that communications class, there was one section of the grade that was devoted to spelling, which makes sense because it's a communications class. And I went up to him and I was like, is it okay if I use British English? Are you going to mark me down for spelling? And his response to that was, well, you're in America, you should be using American English. And then my question to him was, I am here to learn, and as long as it's all consistent, yes, thank you. As long as it's all consistent, when I go into the workforce, nobody is going to be like, oh, why are you using British English in your emails? As long as they understand the message, which is what communication is about, it wouldn't be a problem. So there was that contention on American English versus British English in the written form when I was in that communications class. So for that class, I did turn in the American version. I had to change like my Microsoft Word spelling detection to the American version because mine is by default UK. Duh. Yeah. But I had to change it, and then I had to make sure because we all know the normal ones. We know recognized as an S. I mean, it's a Z. We know color doesn't have a U. Like, I knew those. But the more critical one, like the more non-normal ones, quote unquote, I wouldn't know. So then I would have to, like, Microsoft Word will underline it and I have to Google it. I'm like, oh yeah, it's this. And then I'll go back and change it. So for that class, I did that. But other than that, I've been using British English and it's been fine.
That's interesting. Your manner of speech is sort of a mix between American English and British English.
Yeah.
Certain words are very British, but kind of the flow sounds American to me. I wouldn't have pegged your first kind of experience of English as British. But
there's a lot of American television in Singapore,
I'll
tell you that.
It's very charming, yeah.
Nice. Looking back, kind of like to conclude that part, looking back at your experience in classrooms, academics, learning styles, and so on, what advice would you give to like other international students that are struggling on the learning styles?
I'd say just go with the flow. And that sounds easier said than done, but overly stressing about things is not going to help. If you are able to, at least in whatever manner, shape, and form, communicate that you need help in a certain way, people are going to help you.
Kind of like advocate for yourself and get out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, to add up to Jay's comment, I will feel like in as much as you are here to learn, you are here to learn under the guidance and leadership or mentorship of professors. So anytime as an international student, and I'm speaking based on experience, anytime as an international student, you are facing particular challenges in your academic performance or anything related to classroom interactions, I think first person you should confide in should be the instructor or the professor of that class. because professors, I realize that, and I will keep on stressing this one, Boise State professors have a very, very good reception to students. So confide in your professor, talk to your professors. Also, don't try to segregate yourself from your colleagues. Don't try to I'm black. If you look at me, so everybody's white, so I can't mingle with them. Because sometimes the answer to the challenge you are facing is not even in the hands of the professor. It's in the hands of a colleague in the classroom. So try to, as fast as possible, try to mingle, adapt with your colleagues, have a good relationship with your colleagues, express some of the anxieties that you face during class times to some of your colleagues that you feel like, oh, this person is well advanced ethically, morally, and all those stuff, so that I can be able to speak to the person. Or if I speak to maybe Jay is in the best position to be able to help me address some of them. Then if you realize that after talking to Jay, still some of these issues still persist, then talk to the instructor, go to the professor, talk to the director of your program.
Get out of your comfort zone.
Yes, get out of your comfort zone, because I feel like that is what has helped me adapt fast into the system.
Right.
When I don't understand something, I write the director of the program, Dr. Buck, well, I don't get this thing. I write my advisor, oh, Dr. Anna, it's like, do you have time? Can I come? Can we discuss this? And I feel like talking to them and conversing with professors have even started to, in first year of the program, open up a lot of opportunities for me, open me up to a lot of things that if I should stay in my comfort zone, I move from my apartment, I go to class, I sit down, I don't communicate, sit down quietly, class closed, I pick my bag, back to my apartment. You feel like it became to a time you become even depressed.
And you lose motivation too.
Yes, you even lose interest in why you are here.
Right.
But you are here for a particular reason. All of the people that apply for the program, you get picked for a particular reason. So I feel like do not sit down on your own opportunities and fade out of the system just like that.
That is great advice. Yeah.
That's interesting. From my side, if I have two, I guess, comments. One is if a student is signed up for a class they're going to take from me in the coming semester, they usually know a month before more than that they're going to take the class. Sometimes I'll get emails from students and they say, I'm in your class, I'm signed up, but I'm worried. Like, I have the prerequisites, but I'm worried that I'm not going to be ready for your class. And so I'll say, I very much appreciate those kinds of messages from students. I'll respond and say, here's some things to help. In fact, for my natural language processing class, it's taught in the spring. So as soon as the fall semester ends, I send an email to everyone who's signed up for the class and say, if you're worried about these things, here's some resources. If you're worried about these things, here's some resources. And anyone who looks at that, they're like, oh, I'm fine, I've got these. Fine. But the rest of the students who might not be quite ready in some areas, now they can be a little bit more ready. I forgot to do that this last fall, and I've noticed some of the students weren't quite ready. And even though we kind of start from the ground up, it was noticeable, but that was my fault. Another thing is, if there's an international student especially, but new students who are going to join my research group at the graduate level, I will often tell them, I'm going to connect you with students who are in my research group right now, so you can already start talking to them and ask them whatever you want, because they're going to know things that I don't know about housing, about resources on campus, about communities. And they're going to know things about me. They're going to say, okay, these are things you don't do with Dr. Kennington. These are things to watch out for. I don't even know what they are. But the students know, and they share that with each other. So that helps students kind of feel like, okay, this is the culture that I'm getting myself into. I can prepare for that even before they step foot in Boise.
That's very nice. Being able to prepare and kind of mentally, but yeah. That's very nice. I'm kind of glad you mentioned housing, because this is our next topic, and it's kind of like a heated topic right now. It's le coup de gueule, if you speak French. Good for you. You understood. If not, look it up. I don't know. So before we get really into the topic, I kind of want to ask around what was your experience coming in to Boise with housing? Yes.
Yeah, that is also one of the key topics that as an international student, any international student in United States, irrespective of the university you find yourself in, have to battle with when you get your admission. Apart from funding aspect, the other thing that always have become a headache to international students is housing. So, like in my case, if I'm talking out of experience, in my case, I was proactive. I was very, very proactive. Right after I received the admission letter, and then I reached out to my advisor. That is my advisor that was designated for me. About first thing I reached out about is funding and housing. Then after reaching out to my advisor and giving me replying with some key guidelines, I reached out to the international admissions office. Because as an international student, that office is designated for you. And any resource that as an international student you will need to be able to fit in, or I don't know, but for the lack of word I will use fit into the system, is you have to liaise with the international admissions office. So what I did is I emailed them and tell them, I have admission and I've received the guidelines as to what to do next after you have the admission letter. So now it's accommodation. Now, what I asked the international admissions office to do for me is that I want them to link me up with other international students who are currently Boise State students are on campus. Because I feel like even those students will have information that maybe the office is not privy to, because they are on the ground. They know what is happening on the ground. So I emailed them, and luckily for me, I started receiving emails from other international students from Africa and other parts of the world, reaching out to me, "Hey, Lawland, welcome to Boise State," and all. And then I was fortunate to get 2 people who have very key interest in my accommodation issues. So they start giving me guidelines, what to do next, how to do, what are the mediums as you start exploring, and then start searching for accommodation. Then through that process, I was lucky enough to get a Ghanaian student in the computer science program. He is here and he's like my countryman. So I was like, wow, you are here. Even if I don't get accommodation, I will come and sleep in your room with you. And I was like, wow. And so he was, when I arrived in Boise, that is on the 12th of August, he came to pick me up at the airport.
Wow.
Yeah. And then after picking me up, unfortunately, his room was full. So before I even came, he also talked to other international students who are from Africa, and then they were able to house me for almost like 3 weeks. Then after 3 weeks, he was able to work out with the apartment office to be able to get me an apartment at Village. And that is my story.
Wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
That is my story. So I feel like when you receive admission as an international student, please work with the international admissions office. I don't know, in Boise State it is called international admissions office. I don't know what is called in other universities, but I'm speaking as a Boise State University student, and I'm saying that reach out to them.
Be proactive.
Work fast, reach out to them, talk about the issues and things that can help you assimilate into the system fast. And one of the key things is accommodation, because you can't come and you have your luggage and everything on you, and how are you going to survive? So I feel like that is one of the headache, and we have to, as international students coming in and those who are here, we have to be proactive about that.
It seems like you were able to connect with international students before coming on campus, and that really helped you a lot, those connections.
Yes.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you found housing that way. Jay, how did you research and gather information about available housing options?
So for myself, my story is similar in some ways and different. Because I was in Idaho for 2 years prior with my job, I knew some people here who were studying in Boise. And so initially, it was really easy because she searched for a house, for a 2-bed house for both of us. And so we stayed together. However, the problem arose when we needed to move out. Like, our lease ended and we were moving. And we decided to to live separately at that point. And when I started looking at houses around Boise State, like all the student living at Greenleaf River Edge, Uncommon, these kind of places, all of them needed you to have an income 2.5 times the rent, which I obviously don't. And I am here pretty much alone. Like, yes, I have friends, but I don't have that family support system where I can have someone co-sign for me.
Yes, and people cannot co-sign from another country.
Exactly. So I couldn't have my parents co-sign either because I don't even know if there's a process to that. Like, how does the paperwork work? How does the...
It's not possible. I've asked before. You cannot have a co-signer that is that has a residence outside of the United States.
Exactly. So I knew no one here that could co-sign for me. And so that was a really, really stressful couple of weeks for me. And what ended up happening was I found a room on Facebook, the Boise State Housing and Lease Facebook page, where this girl, she went back home for this semester. And so her mom was putting up her room for a lease takeover. And because I was able to sway her mom into being the co-signer for me, that's how I got the room, which was a really difficult process. Like, how do you convince a stranger to co-sign for you? And I am so thankful and grateful that I was able to do that. But for someone who's not able to do that, how would they go about doing it? And this was mid-semester, so there's no on-campus housing available. So that was a really stressful time for me.
It is so stressful. On top of, like, being a student and having to manage everything else in your life, you're, like, fighting to have a place where to live. How do you think that can affect your academic performances?
So I remember there was this one class, data management, that I wasn't even paying attention the entire class because I was on Facebook trying to find a place to live. And at the end of that class ended, everyone stood up and walked out. I was like, oh no, when did class start? When did it end? What happened? And immediately I walked over to my director's office and I sat down and I was like, I am facing some issues. I need help. And I remember just crying when I was in her seat and she was like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to sleep next week. And she tried to email International Students Office. She tried to email a bunch of other places for me to get information, but even she didn't know how the process would work.
Yeah, we're kind of not plugged into that. The only thing I hear is stuff from students where they say there's not enough housing and everything that is available costs too much. And that's part of, there's just a lot of growth in Boise and the costs go up because of that. Then the housing, the university has grown. It used to be a commuter college. You live in Napa, you live in Caldwell or Mountain Home, and you drive, and then you drive home when you're done. And there's still a lot of that going on, a lot of commuters. But the more international students come, where are they going to commute from? It's silly. You kind of don't want to own a car because you want to live close to campus and close to everything you need so you can walk where you need to, and cars are just an extra expense. You can't afford it on a graduate assistantship or something around that. So we, like, from our side, we've had, we talk about it in our department meetings and we're concerned about it. So a lot of that comes into, okay, in our college, we're going to raise the graduate assistantship. And that means we have fewer assistantships to offer. We just split them up a little bit differently. That way people get paid a little bit more. And it's, the more the better, obviously, but we also try to aim for the kind of average pay that students get throughout the United States. So it's not the smallest, obviously, but and we want to attract good students. So but the cost of living in Boise has gone up so dramatically in the past 5 years or more. I moved here in 2016, and it was just kind of starting. Finding a house then wasn't the end of the world. It was expensive, but it was doable. But in the years that followed, it's just been crazy. So they're trying to build more housing around campus, but like that doesn't help you now because you need a place to live now. hopefully that, I mean, we're like 5 years behind, I'd say, on raising the money that you get from your assistantships. And it kind of has to be lagging. For example, if a professor asks for a grant from the National Science Foundation, they budget how much money they would pay a graduate assistant. But then if the next year the college comes along and says, "Oh, we're going to raise it," like, well, I didn't budget that, so they're going to get what they're going to get, and maybe I can supplement the extra somehow. So that's a challenge. And then, of course, no matter how much you pay someone, if they can't find a house or a place to live, they can't find a place to live. So it sounds like the way to do it is you got to know people. And if you don't know anybody, you just know that that's how you do it. The international office can help you, but they can't take care of you. You actually have to be quite assertive about finding a place to live. And that's hard. Because like you said, you're not going to pay attention in class if you don't have a place to live that night. That's just one of the hierarchy of needs that you need. That's something I know that every level at Boise State we have been trying to respond to and been concerned about, but it does lag behind, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then it's kind of like a snowball effect. Yep. You're just like mentally not available to pay attention in class, and then it just moves on to something else, and a little stress, and because having a roof on like above your head, it's kind of like
that's number one.
It's number one,
Yeah, I think I can speak to that because before I even come to this podcast, I was talking to one of my colleagues almost like 30 minutes. He's currently in Ghana, and we are discussing house, and I feel like because recently there has been housing deficiency by moving people out of the University Park apartment, and then that has also created some huge kind of housing deficiency between the graduate students, and it's become a worry. I was talking to him, it's like, Lawland, what I'm thinking about now is about when I come back to Boise, what will be, where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to sleep? And then I was trying to, we are trying to look at options, because being a graduate international student, and it's something I think is on our menu to talk about it, which we'll go into it later. We have kind of some limitations posed on us. Like, we are limited by several things that we can't do. And then also, whatever we are living on depends on the kind of assistantship we get. And then I received a communique from the university apartment that we have to alert them of trying to, renew our apartment agreement, and also, but it also comes with some increments in the apartment.
Yep.
And then this is a case where your funding or your graduate assistantship is static, is stagnant, but cost of living, as you said, because when I came in, I was going to Winco to buy stuff, but I realized that now those things are going up. Every time I go to Winco, there has been increment, and the same thing happens to accommodation.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the fund that you can use to fund accommodation is very stagnant. So I think that's one of the challenges when you talk about accommodation. So you end up living in maybe a room for two, you might end up living in a room like 3, 4. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those things psychologically has an impact on you. And because of that impact, it affects everything you do, right? From academics to, and one thing that I feel like it is a bit silent when we are discussing international students is that some of the international students, most of them in graduate programs are family men. Like, they have family. As you've earlier stated that you travel to Germany with your family, your daughter was giving birth to in France. Some of us also come with family. And you see, sometimes it is very, very difficult to come and spend like 5 years in the United States doing your PhD and then leave your family behind.
Right. That
alone, thinking about what is happening back home, is a burden. So those are some of the things that when we are coming, we felt like, let me come with my family. So when you're coming with your family, you have to think about accommodation. Those are some of the things that indirectly, firsthand, it goes to impact your performance. Yeah, because you are stressed about a lot of things that you shouldn't in the first place be stressing about.
When I was a PhD student, I had 3 kids. And my wife, kids were small. My wife couldn't really work, and we had visa restrictions. As you know, the visa restrictions make it difficult for you to get supplementary income if you wanted to. It's even stricter in the United States than it is in Germany in many cases. But in order to find housing, I had to go further and further outside the city where my PhD was, and it was an hour commute to get in. I could do it cheaply because they have good, train and bus systems, and I could ride my bike a lot of the way. And then students could kind of get on any bus or train for free. So there was that. But we also had a car, and I get it. On the other hand, it's different in a place like Boise. Like they can give students free or reduced bus fares, but the buses they don't go everywhere, and they're not completely reliable. So Boise itself, the Treasure Valley itself, there's good efforts on trying to keep public transportation alive and working for as many people as possible, but it's also way, way behind where it could be. And that does affect students who might think, okay, I can live in Middleton or somewhere outside of Boise, a 30-minute drive, much cheaper, but I can't get there. So what do I do? Online classes aren't the answer because you want to get to campus for a lot of different reasons. So anyway, I'll pause there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of different issues on a lot of sides of housing. I kind of want to move on to the visa limitation, like it was mentioned a couple times here. What specific visa limitations or restrictions have you encountered while studying abroad? So just to our listeners, just so they know, international students are not allowed to work more than 20 hours a week. And they're not allowed to work outside of campus. So it has to be a student job on campus, 20 hours or less per week. So that's already quite a lot of restriction. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, so if you come as a graduate research assistant, your 20 hours is already gone. It's exhausted. You have nothing else. So whatever you are getting at the end of the month, that's what you should strategize, plan your spending, and try not to exceed it. Yeah, try not to exceed it. And then in my case as an international student, in terms of visa, even getting the visa alone, the processes after you get admission to come to the United States is something that
it's amazing.
Is something that if we should you have to call us for a new podcast to dedicate like a whole time discussing that issue. And you see, if I had funding as an international student, that is one, I want to come, and then your hours that you are supposed to work is 20 hours, and maybe probably if in summer you can work up to 40 hours. But you see, that hours is taken by your graduate research assistantship. Indirectly, there's nothing you can do again. So whether you are short on fund, there's no any other place you can go to. Yeah. And that is one. Another thing is that if you are international students, I feel like one of the limitations that come with that 20 hours work is that it doesn't help us to become more competitive in the job market. Because at the end, I'm going to compete with, let's say, Jay. Let's assume Jay is an American citizen who perhaps doing the same program with me, but is working full time. Have tons of work experience. And you see, sometimes it is not every international student that will graduate from a PhD program and want to go into academia. Others want to venture into industry. And because of that limitation, it's like your whole life is dedicated to research. And because of that, you don't get extra experience. Like, let's say, if I'm to use the semester to do research, then use the summer to go out there and then explore, work in the industry and to be able to get industrial skills to supplement or to complement my research skills that help me to become more competitive or more vibrant and give me that power to be able to compete in the job market. But that limitation alone, that 20-hour limitation put on F1 visa holders, is something that it's in the broader sense, it's like it is really not helping us. It's like it is shrinking us instead of helping us too. Because I want to be competitive. I want to get more exposure. And if I'm in a class where I have colleagues who are working full-time and they come to class, they are also performing academically. Indirectly, it's trying to tell me that for me, I can't work full-time, or I can work full-time and also become academic proficient. In the sense that you are telling me that I'm not good enough. You see, by law, that's the implication. Yes, I can't do it. And it is good as an international, the reason why you are here is education. But one thing that every student, as whether international student or American student, is thinking about, what next after I graduate?
Right.
Yeah, totally.
That is the question. What next after graduation? So I was talking to one guy, and it's like, I'm in my third year, and even my thesis that I'm writing, it's like I have even forgotten about it. And what I'm thinking about is writing applications.
Right.
Writing tons and tons of applications. So all that goes through our head. Either you are an international student or any student at all, Boise State, is what next after education. And the visa limitation with the 20 hours work on campus. And let's assume Boise State have over 24,000 student population. How many jobs do we have on campus?
Not 25,000.
Yeah.
25,000.
Not 25,000. So indirectly, we have to, I think like that is one of the things that authorities, like not Boise State alone, like student bodies, higher education in the United States, have to start thinking about, and if propositions can be made, and then I don't know, it's like this is high above even the schools. It is the law of the land.
Yeah, it's national law.
It's a national law.
Yeah.
And this is not something that any academic institution say, I'm going to change it. You can't change it. Unless maybe there has been consistent conversations from higher institutions with higher power trying to fight for these kind of things and be able to help us, because I feel like that will help us a lot. Because assuming I'm doing my research work for 20 hours, and also maybe I have another 20 hours to do industry work. Maybe during summer or something like that, I have extra things to be able to do, and not only to focus on research alone. Because indirectly, you're telling me that, and I talk to some of my colleagues, most of my colleagues, and they are like, no, even postdocs, and they are like, I finished postdoc and I don't want to go into academia. I'm in the postdoc because that is what my CV is able to get me now. And I'm even thinking post my postdoc is not academia I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about industry. But the only competency you have now is academia.
Yeah.
And I was talking to one of my professors the other time. It's like, Lawland, if you want to go to academia in the United States, you have to become competitive. How do you become competitive? It's not, you do, because as professor is here, you don't only teach, you don't only do research.
Right.
You interact with organizations. You go to conferences where you teach people in practice.
You build a network.
Yes, you build a network, and it is through getting those exposure out of the school environment that gives you some of these leverages. So I feel like that is one of the things that it is something that authorities have to start conversation.
Thank you. And that's a real issue. It does affect you professionally, but also mentally, for your like emotional well-being. You know, you're like, I'm stuck and there's nothing I can do about it. So I just focus on the thing I do and hoping for the best and trying to build my network within the university, and it's tough.
I had a situation when I was starting my PhD program. I went to get my visa, and I gave them the contract I had. I had a graduate assistantship, and they looked at it and they said, "How many kids do you have?" I said, 3. And they said, "This isn't enough. You can't live here. We can't give you a visa because you don't make enough money." And I was like, "Well, this is how much they pay me." And they said, "Well, we can't give you a visa." So I happened to have a remote job for a U.S. company, but it was like project, like if I had a free weekend, work 5 hours here and 5 hours there and maybe get paid a little. But I went to my university and said, "Can I do this?" And they said, "No, you can't have a second job. It's against your contract." And I said, "I can't get a visa because I don't make enough money. But if I can bring this income in and count it as supplementary income, then they'll give me my visa." And they were like, "Okay, I guess go do that, but don't tell us." kind of a thing. And I'm not telling you to do that, but I'm saying it is really difficult. No matter where you go, being a student, it's a wonderful opportunity to go abroad to get a degree. And then when you're done, right, let's say you're really good and you do get a job offer, you have to have a degree if you're going to stay. You can't get a certificate. You can't just take a bunch of classes. You actually have to finish your degree in order to transfer your F1 visa to something else where you can work for a couple of years, and then the company has to sponsor you. It's really hard. I get that. I don't know how to change it, and we can't change it at the state level. Universities can't change it. We're kind of stuck with it, but there might be some grassroots things we can do to open that up for students. I know there have been in the past, but it ebbs and flows with time.
I think it's just really important to talk about it and get it out there, because it's an information that not all professors are aware of.
Yeah.
And it's something that can definitely affect your academic performances and the way you are in class and interacting with people. So it's really important to put that information out there and build that awareness of all the challenges that international students have to deal with and the stress it implies and how that kind of affects your whole person and identity. I feel like.
Can I ask what to get the visa? I'm an American citizen, so I have no idea. To get the visa, what are the steps you have to go through?
Well, for Singapore, it's really easy. There's just a list of things to submit all of it, and then for me, I didn't even have to do an interview because I've had a work visa before that for the States, so for me it was super easy.
But the work visa, for the first time, you did have to interview and go through all that stuff.
For that, it was a diplomatic visa, so not really again, but that was because it was a diplomatic visa.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's another difficult aspect of the process of even. So what we normally do is that we ask ourselves this question: after admission letter, what next? Is visa. It's visa, because there have been occasions, several, even in the year when I was coming, there has been people who have some level of funding, but they go to the visa interview and they were denied. Why? Because the cost of attendance and the funding they have can't support.
It's not enough.
It's not enough. Yeah. So in my case, the process is that when you get admission, now in Africa, most of the things is that when you get admission, one thing that we also hunt for as students is funding. Because without funding, you can't even go to close to the territory of the embassy. You can't even step there. You can't even go to bank to go and buy your visa ticket to be able to apply online. And so one thing that helps us to be able to go to even start the visa application process is the funding. So right after the funding, and you are able to get a good funding, then you start the visa application process. And then the process starts with you buying tickets, filling the online form that is DS-160, and after filling the DS-160, you have to go for interview.
And the interviews are only at the embassies.
The interviews are only at the embassies. And then we have, in my year, when the year was coming, that was 2023 August, I went to the visa interview on July 26th.
Ooh, that's tight.
And then right in front of my face is people are funding and they are being asked to go back home. And then I asked one guy who is going to do PhD, has been asked to go back home. It's like, no, I met one lady and she asked me some questions. You see, sometimes when we enter the American embassy premises, the tension and the intimidation alone, it's like you can be the most brilliant person on earth, and that help you get the admission.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go to you can stand in front of the person interview you, as Ivan is doing right now, and Ivan will just actually go, I'm not approving your visa. Or because, one, you have been tensed, and then probably you can't express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that amazed me is that before even you get admission, most of the graduate programs, you have to go through series of interview.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the case where you get admission, you had funding, you go to the embassy, and then you have been sent back home. And sometimes, one thing I ask is that sometimes the people that interview you, most of the times, it's your area. Maybe the person doesn't have nothing to do with your area, don't know anything about area. The person expects you to be able to let him know your area and understand it before the person approves your visa. Mm-hmm. So I think like one of the challenges as an international student is the visa process. It's a tedious process.
And it takes a long time.
It takes a long time.
I think, so if we send out admission letters and then a couple weeks later make decisions about funding, let's say it's the first or second week of April, it's still not enough time for a lot of people to go through the entire process because you can't make an appointment until you have the admission letter and the funding. Then it takes 2 months to get the interview, and you have to somehow get to the interview, which might be in another city somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And then you might have to go multiple times, and that's.
Yeah. So even I have an occasions where people, because of the number of people applying for the visa, because the visa interview is not only for F1 students, we have B1, F2, and all K1 and all those stuff. So for you to even get to, for example, in my country, Ghana, that time, the interview list was full into 2024.
Wow.
So now we have to now write back to American consulate in US for them to approve your expedite application.
Yeah.
And I have to travel like 11th, and then I have to go to interview on 27th. And then after 27th, I have to take a decision whether I'm now going to see that, and am I going to United States, or I'm have to stay back in Ghana. And I feel like it's like the process alone stops a lot of people who had admission to even continue to
You should get your degree just for getting a visa, it sounds like.
Yes, you should.
Yeah.
But we can't really change the system, but it's good for students to know, like, get your visa, start the housing process and the visa stuff as soon as you can.
Yeah, as soon as you get admitted, really get on those two things right away. It's going to help you kind of like have time to go through that process. And also kind of like it's less stressful when you're proactive about things. I kind of want to touch about my visa experience. So I went to the US Embassy in Paris twice already for a visa interview. First time was in 2017 and not 2015, sorry. And after the interview, they didn't even tell me if I was denied or accepted. And so I stressed for 2 weeks until I received my passport in the mail because I didn't know. Or maybe I didn't speak English well enough at the time where I didn't understand if I was denied or accepted. And that level of stress, I remember it was like almost 10 years ago now, but like it was so bad. I was shaking. I was like, I don't know what just happened. I got off the US Embassy. I was like, my dad was waiting for me outside because he couldn't come in with me because he was not applying for a visa. And I was 17 at the time, and I just came out of there. I was like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what I said. Hopefully, finger crossed, I get accepted. But it's such a very emotionally stressful situation. And the second time I received I went for my visa was before coming for grad school here. That went a bit smoother because my English was better. I was a bit more able to explain what my goal was. And one of the questions they asked me was, are you planning on staying in the US? No.
Always say no.
Yeah.
Always say no because they are giving you a student visa, and that can definitely wait and the decision they make if you say yes.
And you can change it after the fact if you finish your degree. It is challenging.
Exactly.
Some programs won't let you at all. Like we had a Fulbright scholar from Egypt come, and she said, "Yeah, it'd be nice to stay in the U.S. and work a little bit, but I can't. I have to go back." And
right.
It was fine, but you have to kind of, depending on where your funding's coming from, that can alter the kinds of options that you have.
I am also actually going back to France in June, and I have to renew my visa because I got my OPT approved, and so I'm able to work in my field of study one more year after I graduate here. And because I decided to go back to France to visit family this summer, in the 3 weeks time lapse I'm in France, I need to go to the U.S. Embassy, renew my visa, receive it, and then come back here. And I feel it's going to be really stressful, knowing that I looked at some of the appointments that are available right now, and there is no appointment available while I'm in France. So I might have to fly back there a bit earlier than I had planned. I mean, it's a whole organization.
Yeah. And the reason why you go to Paris isn't to see the U.S. Embassy, but that's...
Well, the Eiffel Tower is not too far, so I usually stop by there.
I have been there before after my daughter was born, yeah. We had a 3-week-old with us, and we had to go get her passport and everything at that embassy, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. That was so good to hear from your different experiences, and so much important stories were shared today. So thank you for that. This was Yvan Elias on Venturing Voices. Thank you so much.